The PMO world is at an inflection point. AI is reshaping how work gets managed. Microsoft is rewriting the platform rulebook, and the organizations that get this right will pull away from those that don't. The Frontier PMO is the podcast for project and work management leaders who want to be on the right side of that line. Hosted by Taylor and Tad Haas, two of the sharpest minds in Microsoft work management. This is where co-intelligent strategy meets real-world execution. Let's get into it.
Hi, and welcome to the Frontier PMO, where co-intelligent human and AI value delivery happens. I'm Mike Taylor, and I have with me Tad Haas.
Morning, Mike.
Hey, Tad. We've been talking a lot about this subject lately, and we're finally getting around to actually doing a podcast on it. Hopefully, it'll take off. We'll see how it goes. So the Frontier PMO is really a concept that I think has started to evolve and really came to fruition as part of understanding where Microsoft was going with the concept of the Frontier Firm, which they launched last year. It was part of their work index of 2025, and they've continued. The new work index report is just out. But really, the idea is to try to start to put some context around everybody's, AI's everywhere. Love it or hate it. There's all kinds of takes on it, but it is becoming a part of work management and project management, right?
Absolutely. And I think that the annual report by Microsoft just keeps getting better and better as they talk about this new world of work. And as someone who was at Microsoft for 10 years, I know that all the aspirations and the way we've changed, in these decades. So, we're at a very important moment, and everything is changing.
Yep. And I think it really is an inflection, right? We've been talking about how AI could support project management, work management for a few years with varying degrees of acceptance, I think, with customers. Some were just like, no to AI altogether. Some were like playing with it. They were doing a little bit with, assistant type work with Copilot, GPT, and now, of course, Claude's coming on huge, especially in the Microsoft now that you can use it within the Microsoft framework and the platform. But I think things are starting to coalesce into some real patterns of how people are thinking about it now. And going back to the Microsoft framework, they really break it into, and I'm sure they had analysts working with them and things like that about what are the kind of the steps and how you get there. But we're also at sort of a moment right now, especially you talk about M365 and Microsoft and project management. And that moment is partially defined by the retirement of Project Online, right? And that's driving a lot of conversations around what is the future of project and work management and PPM on the Microsoft platform. And as somebody who used to be right in the epicenter of all that, you were on the project team, you were there back in the day when Project Online was being developed and going to the cloud. It was coming out of the client server and moving to the cloud. You're kind of coming full circle. Now we're seeing the end of that, and now the next evolution of where project and work management is going on the platform.
Well, and I think platform is the key word there. You will no doubt talk more about this as we get through the conversation. But in the past, as we moved to these SaaS products that were sort of out there helping us do project and portfolio management things, they were helpful, and Project Online was a perfect example of that. But more and more, it's the platform that becomes most important. It's that common thread of everything, all of our work, not just projects, that differentiates what happens going forward. And in order to get co-intelligence, in order to take advantage of AI, you really need to be prepared in that way, not another product here, another product there, and a third, fourth, and fifth somewhere else. So it's really, everything is changing.
Yeah, it really is. And, it was kind of like one of those movies where, there's like a charging army or a train that's way off and it's way off and it's way off and all of a sudden it's there. That's kind of like the way the Project Online retirement happened, right? We were there. We got early insight into it. You were in a different organization. I was there. We heard from Microsoft directly in 2018, 2019 when they were going to go in this direction. They said, we're not going to be a PPM product anymore. We're going to be a platform for PPM. And I think some people kind of got that pretty quickly, and some kind of went, I don't know what that means. And others like, yeah, whatever. It's not going to change. Well, last September, it became real when they announced the retirement of it. And there's been a lot of consternation. Disruption is disruptive, right?
Yeah, well, thank you for that Monty Python flashback. I was just having that visual, so nicely
That's
done.
exactly the movie I was thinking about. Yep. So, you know, stepping aside from project portfolio management for a second, you know, AI and how we work, it's really evolved pretty quickly. I think going back to about 2023, late 22, 23, when GPT hit the scene and people started really working with it, people started seeing that there's benefit to having an assistant, an AI assistant, and having a way that you can, you know, have something help you do work and do it better and faster. And I think that piece has really started to evolve and is moving into the platform. You've seen that with like Copilot within Teams. I think one of the biggest use cases you see all the time, people in work management, project management talk about it, is it's so great to have, you know, the ability to have something that will listen to your meeting, will encapsulate what you've done, will take notes for you, will summarize those notes, will actually identify action items, potentially risk or issues or other things that are, you know, project related. So from an assistant kind of perspective, people have really embraced AI, and in many cases, it's been bring your own AI. Right? People have gone out and signed up for Claude or GPT or Gemini or whatever. Right?
Right. You've brought up two super important points there. One is, you know, the power of AI coming into us as individual workers, right? As a knowledge worker, we all can use these tools to do things faster and better. And, you know, that means very specific things for project managers. I'm doing a demo this afternoon with a customer where we're showing them more about the planner agent and some of the capabilities that the planner agent will bring to Microsoft Planner and Planner Premium. And these are really out of the box capabilities that are now available to the project manager users. This particular customer is looking at how that sort of up levels to the PMO. So it's great that they're being productive. It's great that they can go through and add some tasks. But what does that mean to the PMO is, you know, one of the neat parts of the conversation we'll be having today.
Yeah.
The second thing you brought up though is the one that gets a little bit scary. And by that, you talk about bring your own AI. Well, that's not the best way forward in a lot of cases because these different AI tools and, you know, XYZ, pick a name, right? These tools are not necessarily meant to scale at the enterprise level. They're not validated. They're not secure in the same way that Copilot is secured within your tenant, within your data. I always know as a Copilot user, when I see the work or web button, you know, it tells me very clearly how I'm engaging and what I'm in, you know, where I'm getting data from or exposing data. So that's a key value of Copilot.
Yeah, absolutely. So taking this into the context of how people are starting to, we're seeing this because we work with people all the time that are, you know, in PMOs. They're probably some of our biggest customers, or PMO directors, or VPs of planning and strategic initiatives, and those are the kinds of titles of folks we're working with who are our customers, as people would say, our ideal customer profile, right? So those folks are kind of, we see the whole gambit, right? We see the kind of the early adopters who are doing stuff with AI, and some that still aren't. But I think most organizations are still, their PMOs are still very much in kind of a almost a legacy kind of configuration. If you think about it, maybe in three steps of like legacy being, they're still doing things the way they used to do it. Maybe they're using AI to do things a little bit better, a little bit faster, but it's mostly chasing data. It's reporting on information that may not be the most relevant because you don't have it available. Hopefully it is, but sometimes it's not. There's many times, almost in every case, it's disaggregated. You have multiple systems you're working across. You're trying to reaggregate it. Then there's sort of a transitional piece where people are starting to do more of the AI. They're starting to think about the architectural connotations of it, and they're working with, you know, collaborating and putting the data together and maybe unifying the people and the apps and the data and starting to work forward. I don't think we're really seeing anyone in that third category, which is what we're now calling the Frontier PMO, where it's truly collaborative, intelligent work management. You see glimpses of it, right? You mentioned the planner agent. Planner agent, you and I were at Ignite back in November. And we saw firsthand. They, Howard and Robin gave a great demo of the planner agent, and it was doing some interesting things. It wasn't just doing things like Gen AI spitting out a new a project plan based on, you know, reasoning over some data. It was actually assigning work to the agent to go do the work with a human in the loop. And I think in that particular thing, it was go off and do some research around a particular type of project, some market research, and bring it back. So agent went out and did it. And then the project manager, who happened to be Robin, who was running the demo, approved it, and it was there. And so now you actually have some of that collaborative work management happening, right? That was cool.
Right. And tell me that's not a big change for organizations to have more resources available to do work on the projects, right?
Right.
There's no additional cost for this resource. It's part of your Copilot license and you go out and do that. So for me, as someone that's been involved in this space for a long, long time, that was pretty kind of, a moment of epiphany.
Right.
And there's so many different ways of doing this and ways to get value out of that. Because most of our clients are actively using Teams, they're actually collaborating in Teams meetings. When the facilitator agent makes those recordings, those things become actionable, right? Those become useful elements. And when you're sharing a document in a Teams conversation as part of your project, when you're calling up another Excel file and you're collaborating in 365, all of that data then becomes available for the AI to reason over, which is significantly different than if you have some third party system outside of the house, if you will, where you're sort of after the fact managing projects and doing static reporting and everything else versus real-time engagement for both the human in the loop and the AI that's going through and doing their part.
Right. Right. Yeah. And the interesting part is we're now several minutes into this and we haven't talked about the way people used to talk about it. You kind of hinted at it a little bit, but whenever you used to talk about a project management system or tool, you would almost always start with, how do you define a task? How do you define the relationships within the task? How do you do, it was always around the task management piece of it. And while that's still super important, people are focusing a lot more on the collaborative aspects of it, on all the metadata and all the collaboration that's going on around the project and the task. And the task become part of that whole scenario. But we used to say this back when you were enrolled and Project Online was coming on. It was one of the really cool things is it was SharePoint based, and because it was SharePoint based, collaboration was more of a central figure in the product than a lot of the tools that were basically task based. Right? You could open up a Primavera, great tool. You can do thousands of lines. You can do bill of materials. You can do all this other stuff, but it is super time-phase task sensitive. So if you're going to do a construction project, you might go and start doing all that stuff. But if you really want to work with the collaboration components of it, that's what we used to talk about being, collaboration was more of a first party to the solution back then. And now it's becoming even more so. And now AI is becoming part of that collaboration.
Well said.
So as we kind of thought through this, and we did, when we kind of introduced the concept of the Frontier PMO, we did it at the PMXPO back in March, which was a great event, by the way. I think there were 107 or 110,000 people signed up, and we don't see the insight into how many people watched our session, but there were only 3 of us who had the on-demand sessions, I think, that were external. There were a couple more, so we had to have had thousands of people did it. We got lots of responses, lots of LinkedIn responses.
We were very busy answering questions in the moment and all of that. So yeah, it was great.
So thousands of people reacted to it, which was great. That I believe that tells us that there's a lot of interest in the topic and understanding how, not just how to understand a little bit more about AI in general, but how you apply this in a meaningful way. And one of the things that's really important is, I think you have to start to become intentional. And you said this at the beginning around the data structures, around the platform. If you really want to move towards a Frontier PMO kind of footing, you have to start with the foundational component of making a platform decision or making a decision to platform somewhere else. But whatever it is, you need to make that decision because you're going to live with that decision for a very long time. Right. And in fact, we're, with the Project Online retirement, we're working with a lot of customers who have legacy solutions that have been built on, some of them Project Server, some of them on Project Online. And these things go back years. Sometimes our customers don't know who actually did some of the work. It could have been a consultant, could have been somebody who was there. It's 10, 12, 14 years ago. Those things have, the people have moved on, but the stuff is still there and the technology is still there. So when you make these decisions, you're going to be with them for a while. So it's important to think about now the decision zero or decision, the foundational decision is now is the time to start considering that if you're really wanting to move towards this new world of collaborative, value realization. And so
Mhm.
what we've done is we've kind of broken it into what we see three steps or three phases that happen. And it's almost like a maturity model, but it's not really. We're not calling it a maturity model, but it mirrors very closely what Microsoft talks about in terms of the frontier firm and work management. And of course, project portfolio management is simply a domain area of work management, right? And
Yep.
there's a lot of work management that happens on the Microsoft platform. You have, I think, close to 1 billion people use Office. There's 450 million or so that use the collaborative platform with Teams and the whole structure on it or something. So it's a big deal. A lot of work is happening in the platform. So the three phases that we see, we've touched on it, but really it's important to sort of kind of get your head around if you're thinking about moving forward in this rate is the first phase is kind of the AI assist phase, which is I think what we've talked about, and a lot of people are there now. So it helps humans work better, more efficiently. You're working with AI on things like meeting notes, maybe risk signals, sentiment analysis, things that AI can help with. And AI is helping to make us humans project managers. We're both project managers. We've done a lot of project management work. It's becoming very cool to be able to get your meeting notes in no time, right? Rather than having to go to your OneNote, or in my case, my written. I still like to write things on paper, and I still do. But translating those into meeting notes, putting them in status meetings, and doing those things was very time consuming. The time that I spend and that our folks spend and our customers spend on doing that kind of stuff has been reduced dramatically in the last couple of years, especially in the last year. You see people using it all the time. It's like, I don't know what I'd do without meeting notes, automatic meeting notes and transcription. It's just awesome.
Yep.
So that's that first piece. Any thoughts on that as far as how that's really added value to work and project management?
Well, the low hanging fruit on that is time savings, of course, but I think the best benefit for it is the removal of assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
When you have an actual document of what occurred and what was said or what was committed to, you eliminate the assumptions or the misunderstandings that happen post meeting. So I think that's the best value outcome, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say, and sort of dovetails onto that thought, which is you have better by removing the assumptions. You're removing them because you have accurate information. Of course, it needs to be reviewed, and we all do
Right.
that, right? We review it. I do not put any AI generated notes into a status meeting or anything without reviewing it and making sure it's right. But once you do that, now you have a more accurate and more complete picture. So you have more and better data,
Yep.
even if it's just the notes that were there and the actions.
Which we know has been said forever, but it is truly key in this moment of AI change, is that better, accurate data that is reasonably structured such that an AI agent, et cetera, can reason over these things will make all the difference moving forward. And those are the steps along the frontier journey, right? How do I
Right.
go from here to there?
Right. So the second phase, second step, whatever you want to call it. So the first was AI assist. It's helping do those things, and that's become very prevalent. Um, I think it needs to get better, and it needs to become standardized a little more. And that's part of the how. We're talking about the what right now, but the how, we'll talk about that in a minute. The second piece is AI augment, right? And that's really when AI begins to participate in the execution of things. And we mentioned a few minutes ago, a great example of that's the planner agent, right? It actually goes and it helps you generate a schedule if you want to do that. Now, some people say, I want to use a template, and that's great. But if it's a bespoke project you haven't done before, then it could be beneficial to have AI help you figure out how to do that. But in actually being able to assign it to do things, it goes and delivers those. That's a great example of it. Schedule building, we mentioned that. Updating issues and risks, we've got a piece built into one of our products, Teams for PM, which actually can help do that. It combs through, and then not only does it identify it and memorialize it in the status meeting notes, it can actually put it into a risk registry or an issue log or an action item log. So that's really important. So it's that second layer is more that AI augment. So that's where AI is really starting to help humans do the work.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm seeing in that as we sort of start to take advantage of these moments of augmentation is that once you have these agents, how can they help you do a better job of the critical role of the PMO, which is communication, right? And we were doing this demo last week. Remember, we were showing how AI can go through and build the dashboard on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to be a Power BI expert. You can actually ask the AI to go through and build the views and the reports for you. And then if you want something changed, then you're just going through that chat conversation to iterate through them again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always the human in the loop, or what you'll talk about next, which is co-intelligence, right? How do we work together with our data, with our agents, our AI, and with our the power of our reasoning to be able to go through and have the wisdom to get the things we need to keep the stakeholders engaged, communicated, and the PMO doing the best work possible.
Right. And so now I think you're starting to touch on the third, phase or pillar of it, which is the co-intelligent value delivery. So you've got the assist, you've got the augment, and then you start to get into co-intelligent value delivery. So this is when humans and AI are starting to orchestrate value together, and it can start at the beginning. What is the value creation? I mean, to deliver value, you have to do at least three things. You have to identify what the value creation is going to be. You have to go create or build the thing, and then you have to make sure that the realization is actually happening. And in just conversations I've had over the last couple of days with heads of PMOs and very large organizations, this is becoming an area of a lot of interest, right? Because forever it has been a challenge to tie strategic initiatives, and you talk about strategic portfolio management and those things, to tie these initiatives to the work being done, to the outcome, and then being able to manage that real time and adjust your portfolio and what you're doing and your resources and your budgets and everything to continually align to getting the best possible value. So at the beginning of that is identifying what those things are that are going to create that value, and then being able to move through the process of delivering that value together.
Absolutely true.
So that goes into things like really deep signal analysis of kind of how what is it that's, and at some point I think you're going to start to see this market kind of information and data, and even specific domain specific information around an industry. There's going to be third-party providers who are going to get better and better at providing this kind of stuff and AI reasoning over it. And then for a PMO to consume that and even have their own stuff, their own market research, their own kind of things. So what are the things that are going to deliver the best value to their constituents, to their customers, and help identify those. And then as they continue to move through the process of building those things, AI and humans will be working much closer together. We've talked about how the planner agent works. I think it's going to get much more when you start to put agent farms together and have that kind of value delivery being built through that. I think you're going to have AI doing a lot of the work. Potentially you can assign AI to go build some code and it brings it back and it's validated by a human, and then it goes in and it's part of the schedule. There's all these things that are going to happen that are going to be very real time, and then I think you're also going to start to see a much better job of the alignment from the top down goals, which has been hard enough, to the bottom up realities. I was talking with one of the PMO leads actually just yesterday, and we were talking about how the resource management thing's always been a hard problem. Human resource management's always it's just one of those things. It's hard to get right.
Always has been.
Yep.
Always has been.
But one of the things that I think AI is going to be able to help with, it's already helping individuals go back to that assistant kind of thing. We're already having AI help us with a planner day. Some people have built into Copilot or Claude or other things the ability to go in and help plan your day. Start to understand who you are, your work patterns, what you're working on, helps you optimize your work. I think that's going to explode. I think that's going to really become a thing at the organic, I kind of call it at the atomic level, which is the individuals that are working. It's going to help us all do that work. You start to marry that with the top-down goals of what you're trying to do as an organization to realize value. And now as all the humans and what we can do start to come together with what the organization's trying to do, we can map things together much more granularly and much better than we could, and adjust to the realities of the situation. That conversation I was having with this PMO lead, I said, it's always been for project managers a bit of an illusion that we control the humans that we are managing in a matrixed or even a non-matrixed project.
Right.
We think we have control. We have some control over what they're doing, but especially in most PMOs and matrix organizations, you're borrowing resources from different places, right? So you don't have blind authority over it. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but in many cases you don't. You're getting developers, or you're getting engineers, or you're getting marketing people, or whatever from these different areas, and you're assigning them tasks. They have other work that may have to be done, and they may have somebody come taps them on their shoulder and says, "Go do this thing." So the reality of their work is not necessarily mapped to what is happening with the schedule and what's happening with this initiative. You're going to be able to align those things almost perfectly, I think, with AI.
And I think that what you've just said is so important. I think of many of our customers, which are IT PMOs, and they often talk about the day job, right? So there's some new IT initiative, or there's some new, requirement because digital transformation is happening again. And instead of, doing just their day job, now they're the one that's maybe even experimenting with AI. But okay, is it a loosey-goose experiment? Is it well defined? Do you understand what innovation means and what the goal and the outcome are, or are you just playing around? So, we talk about the illusion of resource control, or I often say it's influence, right? Am I getting the commitment that they said they would give me to this project? Which is, I think, more often the reality, certainly in IT PMOs and in others as well. So, getting visibility across not only the project tasks, but the actual work that's being requested of the resource, and understanding how that either supports or does not your project goals, or your portfolio commitments, is probably a better way to look at it, I think is pretty important. And the new world the Frontier PMO has more visibility to that than the traditional PMO.
Yeah, 100%. So as we move forward, and you mentioned, and it's actually the quintessential cornerstone of the conversations, the architecture, the platform. Which platform are you really going to move forward on? One of the questions we've had a lot of customers asking these days is, what's going to replace Project Online? And I think we try to help them reframe that's the wrong question, right? It's not what PPM solution am I going to buy next. You've got an opportunity at this particular moment in 2026 to stop looking backwards to what is really a 2015, 2016 product, and trying to hang on to that and say, what is the future of project management and how can I adopt to that? And that's where the architecture discussion comes in.
Well, I think the architecture is critical for all the reasons that you've mentioned, but there's also some practical realities too. If you're a PMO and you're at this moment of choice with the retirement or end of service of Project Online, do you go get yet another third-party tool, which you've got to go through all the change management, all the adoption, all of the cost, impacts. And frankly, some of the tools are getting quite expensive because, that's just the reality of IT services and IT products today. What can you do with less, or what can you do with the things you already have? And that's where the platform choice becomes pretty important, because if you're already using Teams, you're already using M365 for your collaboration, your documents, and everything else, that's a very practical choice to use what you're already paying for instead of paying for it twice, instead of, having to go outside of your day-to-day work, what you like to call in the flow of work, which I think is a great statement, Mike. When you talk about in the flow of work, you mean, assigning that task to your AI so it gets done so you can keep things moving. Or you talk about collaborating through the Word document because it's a contract that we've just iterated on for the 9th time, right?
Never
That's
happens.
in the flow of work.
Right.
So I think these are super important concepts.
Yeah, and into the flow of work, that's a great point. a big part of that is you touched on it there, and I think I just want to elaborate a little bit more. Is that flow of work? If you're working within the M365 platform, you're already familiar with those tools. You're already familiar with the word processing with Word. You're familiar with Teams and the collaboration and the chats and the artifact management. So every time you bolt on another tool, you're context switching. So not only are you paying more for that for the same capability you're getting with, for your artifact management and your collaboration, your workflow, and all those other things, you're making humans have to go think about this works differently over here. And okay, I was just doing it this way. Now I got to do it that way. Now I got to go over to another tool and I got to do it a different way. And that's taxing on us humans, right?
Context switching sucks. Let's be honest. It absolutely does.
Yep. So, moving into, we talked about the what and what we're seeing. So now maybe you'll talk a little bit about the how. Moving into a co-intelligent value delivery system, a Frontier PMO, if you will, it's not going to just happen, right? I think it's going to be more of an evolution.
Well, it's definitely a journey, and whether it's it's a journey like all things, all change. There's step changes, and you mentioned them in all three: the AI assist, the AI augmentation, moving into co-intelligence. So these are some of the things that bridge the gap between the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things. The fear that PMOs have is, kind of multi-threaded, of course, but they're always under pressure because it's just a hot seat in the organization, because you have all the delivery commitments, or at least are advocating for, the delivery of things, even if there's business stakeholder owners. Two, budgets are always under pressure and everything. And, how can we do more with less? So, I haven't talked to any PMO director lately that's hiring, 20% more people. They're trying to figure out how to get 20% more done or better with what they already have.
Right.
So yes, it's a journey and it's a bridge to get people from here to there.
Yeah, I think one of the big pieces that's critical to focus on as a PMO or whatever operational unit you are that's responsible for delivering projects is, in the past, it's been okay sometimes to be just focus on somebody, maybe not the PMO, somebody has determined we're going to go do something, a strategic initiative, and that thing's going to return value to our organization because it's going to help our customers. It's going to, reduce costs, or it's going to, or maybe it's going to increase profit, or it's going to help customer acquisition. It's going to do something. Maybe it's compliance. There's some reason to go do this thing. And the role in many cases I've seen, I know you've seen this too, PMOs get hyper focused on how do we make that thing happen, which is important. How do we deliver that thing? If we deliver that thing, the magic will happen, the value will be realized. I think what's happening now is the PMOs that are really moving forward they have the opportunity to, if you're moving into the Frontier PMO concept, you have the opportunity to take a larger role and to help understand what is the value. How do we deliver that? Not only deliver the value by doing what we said we're going to do, but monitor that along the way and monitor all the things that are going on inside the organization real time to help achieve that in the best way possible. Because we all know whatever we set out to do in these things, these initiatives at the beginning, is oftentimes not what comes out the other end, right? The realities get in the way. They can go over budget. There can be technical complexities. There can be market changes. There can be other initiatives that are dropped in, and all of a sudden you got to go handle that. There can be, and those initiatives might be compliance, or it could be market driven. There's been some huge change in the market, or in, something else that happened. So it's really important to be more responsive. And I think the PMOs have the opportunity to do that. And they also have the opportunity to step outside of the traditional space that they have occupied within the organization. They've occupied the space within, you mentioned like IT, engineering, R&D. These are areas where you had PMOs and project management in general had to grow up to become a discipline, because you're dealing with large numbers of dollars and people, and you had to do it well. But those areas typically only represent 5, 10, 15% of the overall organizational structure in terms of humans and cost. You have the opportunity now to look at all of the work that's going on inside the organization and get it aligned to the value and start to bring all of that together. So that the PMOs who do it well, I think, have an opportunity to really be. Some people are kicking around this concept of value realization office or
Mhm.
value management office or these other things. Like there's other connotations to that
We,
in
we've
private
been
equity
we've
and
been
everything.
talking, we've been talking about benefit realization
Oh,
for
for a long time.
decades.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
Um,
But I think that's the opportunity that this presents.
Agreed. And I think when you start to use this added intelligence, this insight into your data, that the PMO can be more empowering for their stakeholders by presenting a different way of looking at the value data. And, I've always been a fan of promoting the notion of the kill decision. I know it's
Hmm.
a terrible phrase, but it's very to the point. Companies spend way too much time keeping dying projects on the books for way too long.
Hmm.
They literally can save millions of dollars right out of the chute by being more strict and more, on point of killing things that are not adding value and
Right.
getting back to the basics or focusing the resources on the innovations that take them to next.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
point of view, anyway.
100%. And if that value realization curve, if you had a project and you could take by killing it or postponing it or whatever,
Reallocating the resources somewhere else.
right? If there's $1 million there and you were going to get maybe a $2 million benefit out of it, but if you reallocated that million to something else, you got a $10 million benefit. Just
Right.
to be simplistic, you have really grown by 8x the value to the organization, right? And that's the quintessential thing that project management is supposed to always do, is to deliver value.
Right. Well said.
So to try to kind of bring this home, get back to the how, we really see that making the platform decision is, have you made your decision for platform, right? Have you made your decision, and really bringing the people, apps, and data into and kind of collapsing that into the platform where AI and humans can work together. If you don't do that, then you're always going to be trying to stitch this stuff together,
Right.
digitally, technically. And there's a lot of that that's going on in the enterprise framework anyway. There's a lot of very big, very successful organizations that are building data lakes, and there's Snowflake, and there's Databricks, and all this other stuff. I think within the framework of the Microsoft platform, the work is already happening there. With just a little additional capability and work orchestration, we can bring together
Right.
those people, apps, and data and make it happen natively through the solutions that you're building. So we really see that kind of the how piece going into kind of
Mhm.
4 steps. Centralize the collaboration and everything into the platform. So the platform becomes the center of gravity for all your project and work management. Connect the data and the workflows together to reduce the fragmentation. So even if you're using third-party tools, bring it together, bring the key data together, and so that you can start to manage it right there.
Mhm.
Standardize the operational patterns. If you're going to have people all working in teams, make sure that you've got a governed workforce that says, or a governed structure that says, here's how we're going to manage it, so that it's not all over the place. Even just because you're working in teams doesn't mean that you're not context switching if people are managing teams different ways, which we all know how much that can spiral out of
You,
control if you're
you
not
you
careful.
you mean the team's Wild West?
The team's Wild West.
Right.
Have hundreds of teams out there, or
Right.
dozens of teams, or hundreds and thousands of channels, and no one
Right.
knows where to go to do what. And it's just as bad as having a third party app that nobody understands, right? So
Right.
you got to get some governance and ways that the humans and AI can work together by having it standardized.
Agreed.
And then really introducing the orchestration of how these things come together. We haven't even really talked about all the platform capabilities that the Microsoft platform provides, but it natively now provides all the Power Platform capabilities to do all your workflows, to do surfacing of data through Power BI and other types of ways. The AI is embedded directly into it. You're getting more and more of the ability to build agents and workflow with Copilot Studios and Copilots and declarative agents and all these things that you can do. And so it all works right there. But if you do those other things, you now have the native ability to do that right in the platform. And that's when you can start to really get to co-intelligence.
Well, and that's where we like to talk about the orchestration layer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we help organizations do, is we're bridging that gap between traditional PMOs to a more frontier PMO. One of the foundational steps is to put that orchestration layer in that achieves 1, 2, 3, and 4, which you just
Right.
brought out.
Yep, absolutely. And we have a product for that, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So really, I think, kind of in closing this up, Tad, I think everyone has, and they probably do this anyway. What keeps the PMO leaders up at night, right? It's like, where are we going to be in a year or 3 years? You think forward 3 years. We talk about some folks are still, going down the path of patching the past. I just came up with that. It's not bad, huh? Patching the past.
Well, I like to think of it as business continuity. There's a certain level of keeping the lights on that
That's
has
true.
to happen.
That's true. But if you do that, for instance, a good example is we have customers who are moving to PSSE, and they're doing it for very good reasons. It's business continuity, as you said. There's so many customizations, so much business that went on there, and there was such a short time frame that it made sense for them to move back to the Project Server Subscription Edition, because all of their basic business processes, their project management processes were there. That made sense to do that. What doesn't make sense is to sit on it for 3 years. If you sit on it for 3 years, then you're going to be in an entirely different place when you pop out the other end compared to where everybody else is going. And your value to the organization will have declined substantially, because now again, we said, what is Project Online now on PSSE? They're basically what was Project Server 2016, without much, and then it was moved into the cloud, or 2013 into the cloud, and then 16. There's really not much more feature functionality and capability. So you're not taking advantage of any of the modern way of thinking. You're not moved into the modern collaboration space. All the stuff we've talked around with AI and everything, you can do a little, you can move things in, but again, you're not taking full advantage of putting everything into the flow of work, because it's still kind of separate. So,
Right. Yeah, well, right now, if I'm a PMO leader, I'm keeping the lights on, doing the best job I can with all the things I have today. I am certainly trying to do the best with what I have, but then I'm also losing sleep at night because this velocity is crazy, right? The pace of change is ridiculous. So, think about what that means and figure out how to, at least what I'm seeing is, understand that this is a journey to get from here to there, and that through that journey, you'll be able to find what's next without, upsetting all of the apples in the cart, so to speak. And, just keep moving forward, because I don't think putting our head in the sand and, biding time and doing nothing is the right approach now. I
no.
just think that there's too much going on.
Yeah. And even for the folks, I was talking to another PMO lead that is going the PSSE route. They're actually investigating off-platform AI capabilities, by being able to look at certain things that can be safely ingested into another system and give, but that's not in their system. So there's got to be a way to start thinking forward and moving towards the system of record and the system of action and value creation in the future, I think.
Well, and I certainly would advocate that people think about this from a security point of view too. We've gone through all of this effort for SOC 2 compliance and things that we do with our products. And I know that this kind of concern that we've seen from some IT organizations or some enterprises about where AI fits or doesn't fit, I often think that the PMO is the very best place to go through and try this, because they do understand the logic of, investigating, planning, doing, outcome, instead of just experimenting, right? If you throw this out to individual workers, then, they're going to do that kind of stuff versus something that's more systematic with the orchestration layer, with the governance, with the outcomes, understood and planned for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that almost brings us to the end. Do you have any other thoughts, Tad?
No, man, my brain hurts just thinking about all this stuff. So I'm glad that, like, as always, there's change. That's the one constant in business, as we know. Now, how do you just keep along the journey and keep things moving forward? So this has been a great topic, and I really hope that people start to think about the Frontier PMO as their destination, because I think it's a great place to move towards.
Yeah, and we're going to do more of these, right? We're going to probably take some of these concepts that we did and we're going to break them down into more detail. We're going to have some technical experts come in. We'll probably be doing some demos, some ways to do that. We're going to bring some customers in and talk about some where they're at in their journey. So I think there's a whole lot coming up. There's a lot of wood to chop in this in this particular topic of the Frontier PMO and collaborative human and AI value delivery.
Perfect. Was it Ethan Mollick's book Co-Intelligence, or did you say this? Either the book said it or you did. But think about this as the worst AI is ever going to be.
Yeah, that was
And
Ethan.
and if we're that early in this journey, we know things are going to continue to get better. So what fun it's going to be.
Oh yeah. It's scary and it's fun and it's challenging all at the same time. But we're able to see things start to manifest that I honestly didn't think I'd see in my career. I've been doing this for 30 something years now, and some things are changing in the direction of being able to deliver value. It's going to be exceptional, but it's going to take work to get there. We've got to build it.
Agreed.
We've got to build the right frameworks to make it work the right way for organizations. But it's super exciting stuff.
Look forward to our next conversation.
Likewise. Thanks, Tad. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for joining us. If today's conversation got you thinking about your own PMO's future, that's exactly the point. The Frontier PMO exists to help project and work management leaders navigate the shift to co-intelligent work, AI-powered delivery, and Microsoft's evolving platform landscape. For links to the resources and references mentioned in today's discussion, check out the show notes. Mike and Tad want to hear from you. Find Innovative E at innovative.com to start the conversation. And if this is your kind of podcast, remember to like and subscribe.